Hi, welcome back, and thanks to everybody joining us today. I'm FedScoop Editor-in-Chief Billy Mitchell, and it's my great pleasure today to speak with Cheryl Ingstad, Director of Artificial Intelligence and Technology Office at the Department of Energy, and Toni Townes-Whitley, who is the President of U.S. Regulated Industries for Microsoft. Cheryl, Toni, it's great to have you guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. Artificial intelligence is a big topic in the federal government, and particularly interested because I know both of you are sort of on the cutting edge of this. Cheryl within the Department of Energy supporting the AITO, and then Toni with Microsoft as a major partner for the federal government adopting this technology. So, but today let's start with the current event that is sort of on all of our minds, COVID-19. There's a lot of lessons to come out of this over the past 7 to 8 months, particularly around adopting AI. So I'd love to hear, what have federal agencies or, supporting partners in the private sector learned in how AI can support the federal mission for things like continuity, triage, things like that. So maybe we'll start from an inside perspective of government and go to you, Cheryl.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you for asking. So one thing I'm very proud of is that the Department of Energy, which I call the R&D backbone of our country, the 17 national labs spread out across the country pitched in right away. I mean, they just jumped in with their R&D assets and just turned to, how can we help solve the COVID problem? And so just initially a lot of great results there. But then we also very quickly started a project which was called COVID Insights. And that's an unprecedented data sharing partnership, which all Americans, I think, would be proud of to say that we are using our federal data to benefit the American people and to try to crack COVID. And the data sets that we're bringing together here are highly valuable from the VA and then from the HHS, and bringing them to Oak Ridge National Laboratory in a secure data enclave. And then we apply the multidisciplinary teams of scientists that we have there, and as well AI. And then we're co-located with the supercomputer, the Summit, which is the nation's fastest supercomputer. So it's really bringing all the capabilities together to conduct cutting edge research on COVID.
Great. And Toni, from Microsoft perspective, how have you guys worked with agencies and seen agencies adopt AI during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's to the point that Cheryl makes, it's been phenomenal to see the role the technology has played over the last 8 months, and particularly data and AI, where we've probably had our greatest learnings. And some of that is a function of working not only in the federal government, for the state and local governments in the healthcare space, and for myself in the financial services, is the role that AI has played. We started with CDC in helping using our AI frameworks to create these bots that were used for triage, because we found our clinicians were being pulled away from medical intervention for patients in triaging information. And then the bot framework just took off as a way to, if you will, triage the many, many signals and requests for information and data and collated data to help us understood during that time frame where the contagion was actually occurring. And from there, we started to work across health providers, even in the commercial space, that were leveraging the work of CDC, of Johns Hopkins University, and others. So we've seen AI as a triage capability that was allowing, if you will, the direct intervention for the medical care that has been needed and obviously continues to be needed through the pandemic. But more broadly, we found ourselves doing self-assessment bots for New York State through Governor Cuomo's work on the tech squad. We found ourselves working with Department of Defense across all 4 million employees in DoD on our collaboration platforms to use AI to start to actually find where agencies needed to make decisions the most quickly, using the big data capability and analytics to determine where the root cause issues were around the pandemic. And it continues to be in use today. And so I think we've all learned that it's AI, the tech is absolutely important, and the solutions that come. But if I could just make one last insight, was that it really went beyond just the tech. we started to find out about people and the need for digital skilling and building fluency and mastery around the AI tools. And we really put a lot of effort there, as I know Cheryl and Department of Energy did as well. We learned that policies needed to be re-examined, like the trusted internet certificates and the various programs that exist and mandates that have been in place for many, many years needed to be re-examined during a crisis environment to allow for more modern technology to be deployed. And so it's people, it's policy, it's tech, it's never one answer is probably our biggest finding.
That's great. And I think you read my mind a little bit, because the next place I wanted to take the conversation was that skills element in the workforce. AI is great and tech is great, but as you just said, you can't just force it in there if people don't know how to use it. It's not a winning equation. So I would like to talk about how agencies can, agencies that do want to adopt AI can think about the workforce and skilling their departments and in the workforce for the emergence of AI. And then, maybe alternatively, there's also the opportunity that once AI is adopted, it can make things easier for the people who aren't skilled in those things by lowering the bar down for things like low or no code solutions. So Toni, maybe since you mentioned skills, we'll start with you this time.
Well, look, this is very close to the passion of Microsoft from its beginning as a company. This idea of democratizing technology was around getting the digital fluency to a level where we would say we almost had citizen developers, that you could engage in technology at any level, at any background. And so we announced, as you know, a 25 million American focused digital skilling program just a few months ago that's bringing all of our learning platforms together to assist getting that skilling out. A few things that we've learned on the skilling side. One is that it's really deeply important that we leverage platforms. For us, we call them power platforms that allow, in a very low code, almost no code environment, people to be able to build applications with very little computer science background or deep digital literacy, and to do that quickly, particularly in a crisis environment. So we found that our power platforms that create power apps has probably been the fastest growing engagement that we've had across federal government and other sectors. Outside of that, it's really important that the digital skilling be used in the existing collaborative platforms, so that you're not creating a new place for people to go, but as part of their daily job, they can learn in scenario how the technology can be adopted and leveraged in their daily sort of work routines, rather than something that feels contrived or somehow extended from their daily work. So we've learned that. And finally, one of the things that was probably the most tragic as we've done work through the last 8 months is to see the digital equity gaps. Probably most poignant for me was watching those gaps across K-12 school districts and higher ed institutions that showed this lack of a digital infrastructure, and it created a very different experience for students, teachers, and parents across this country. And so we've spent a lot of time on what's the broadband requirement to ensure that not only federal workers, but all workers across this country can close the gap on digital access. We know there's 24 million Americans, at least 25, I think, that FCC has recorded, that have no broadband, no access, and about 19 million of those in rural areas. So we've been making commitments through our Airband commitment that we launched last year to close that gap.
And Cheryl, I know it's something you've been focused on within the AITO as well. Let's hear what you're doing to help educate the masses at Energy on what's to come in AI.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, and we have a lot of passion around it. Just as you heard from Toni, this is an area that I have to tell you, when I first arrived here in February, that I went on my listening tour to talk to key leaders across the entire organization, and I heard so much demand for AI training at all levels. People who already were in the AI professions wanted more training, but particularly, just like Toni was saying, how do we help skilled people who don't have that training? A lot of those that don't, and leadership too, said, we want to understand the value of our data. I know we have great data here in our unit and our team, And, we don't do as much mining of the data. We would love to have those AI tools, or, in the business operations, wow, we would love to apply AI for efficiencies, and so then those things really came out strongly in our strategy, right? But the training part, we've hired up a presidential innovation fellow to come in and lead the training
Nice.
strategy. It's so important for us. And so she's pulling that all together as we speak. But I'll just give you a little insight into what we foresee, which
Great.
is first training will be launched here by the end of the year, and driven by one of the labs, one of the 17 labs. And then from there, we will just have a growing number of trainings. So it'll be at a leadership awareness level, which is really critical in government, since they're making a lot of the decisions, that they really understand, as their staffs are explaining what the AI potential is, that they also as a leader understand and have that background. So we're doing those trainings. And then all other levels of, whether it's just from basic awareness, which we'd like, we would like to do that broadly for the entire department, so that we can create a transformation here. And then the technical skills. So what is, your entry level, intermediate, advanced, in different specialties of AI. So we're looking forward to pulling all of that training together and launching it as a full strategy with executable parts in the future.
That's very exciting. And you mentioned the data piece, and we've heard plenty before that, data is key with AI and machine learning and automated technologies. But expanding that, I'd be curious to hear, what sort of, I position them as challenges, but maybe hurdles that people or things people need to get in order as they're thinking about this journey to AI. What sort of things preclude the adoption of AI? Thinking of, again, the data and the data sharing, or Toni, you mentioned platforms, things like that need to be in place before AI can be effective across the federal space. So Cheryl, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, actually, that's another major part of our strategy, which is really about how can we identify the most critical data sets, and who the user group should be, and apply the right security, and then whether it's through a platform or some other way, make it available. How do we make the right data available with the appropriate security to the users who can really benefit from that? And that is also something that I heard routinely when I went around in my first visits here. So that's something that we're really busy starting down the path on. And another one is similar to it. Not only how do we make the data, these critical data sets available, but the data models as well. So and then that gets to a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is adversarial AI too. How do we, as we do that, and I say ensure the security, but it's not only security once you're on the platform, it's looking at the provenance of these data, before you take them into your system, and having a clear understanding of what's been changed, by whom, and was that authorized, and maybe even using AI to check those data sets, and the same thing for the model, asking all the right questions, like what data sets were these models trained on, and having an additional, basically a checklist of information, basically a certificate that comes with it and explains its background, maybe it's like its health record or whatever. And then you can, and then the users can really better understand what they have. But certainly making AI models and data sets available to a broader amount of our researchers and users across DOE.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I get so excited when I hear what Cheryl has said there, because she's going down a path and she's actually demonstrated this in her leadership. We're very proud of the work she's doing at the Department of Energy. But, we've already talked about, you said sort of what are the inhibitors? We talked about skilling. the fluency of knowing how to deal with tools around AI and those types of technology solutions. Cheryl brings up data sets, making them available, accessible, being able to identify the source of those data sets. And as she starts to talk about adversarial AI, this understanding of the platform and the security that has to be in place for us to talk about cognitive capability and the leverage of AI. It involves the adoption of cloud. Cloud technology is really one of the key infrastructures that needs to be in place to really understand how to leverage AI left to right. And we see that adoption growing faster and accelerating across the federal government. One of the major concerns around cloud has been security. And it's been interesting, we're almost seeing this shift in the definition of security. Is what does security look like in motion in a crisis? Well, it looks like resiliency. And now we're starting to see this amazing uptick around zero trust architecture, was the shift from securing the perimeter to identity, leveraging identity and access, and being able to lock down the sourcing of data and the sourcing of the humans who have the interaction with that data, and to be able to put a coherent system in place. This zero trust that assumes no trust, that assumes no security, and you have to prove your, quite frankly, your need to know or your reason for the data access. That's a shift in how security has been managed in the federal government for many, many years. And it's shifting the dialogue from chief information security officers are saying not just no, or we can't do this now, but how do we shift in this environment? So platform matters. Having a robust platform. We invest $17 billion. We've invested as a company in securing the platform for our customers, and our peers are doing the same kinds of investments because it's critical. It's critical to be able to use these AI tools in a secure environment. When you start talking about healthcare, I love that Cheryl mentions maybe you almost need an electronic health record type audit trail for the data elements. Can you label these data elements and understand their source? And that's the kind of investment that big tech, I think, is attempting to make so that we can give you that attestation that the data, the platform that data rests on is in fact secure and robust.
That's great. One of the topics we're hearing a lot about as more and more departments and agencies across the government adopt AI is really injecting ethics into that AI. I know that both of you in particular work either within AITO, moving to adopt some principles for ethics, or Microsoft and its committee, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, really thinking about ethics and making sure it's at the core of everything when it comes to AI. So I'd love to discuss the need for ethics and how that works. Maybe we'll start with you, Toni, and you can tell me if I pronounced that correctly or not.
I thought you gave it a good try there. So it's actually pronounced ether, but we make it hard for folks. It's not phonetic. So I apologize for that as a former English teacher. But really, the Ether Committee for Microsoft is a set of committees. I have had the pleasure and honor of sitting on the Sensitive Use Committee for almost since its inception 4 years ago. But this is a set of committees that looks at a principled way with basically 6 key principles of how we design technology, how we deploy technology when we choose not to deploy or design against a specific requirement, and how we help educate our customers almost in a warranty-like fashion of what have you, do you know what you've adopted, and do you know how it was intended to be used, and how do we ensure that the intended use matches the actual use so that that technology is at its highest efficacy and cannot then be used for, if you will, infringement of human rights or denial to services. And so on the Sensitive Use Committee, we literally look at cases from around the world, and particularly in government, relative to the use of AI, and we're expanding our body of knowledge of understanding how to use a framework. We have an interdisciplinary team of literally philosophers and ethicists, lawyers and technologists, engineers and researchers that come together literally on a weekly basis to review what we'll call the inductive unknowns, when we're moving inductively in the design and we don't know what's around the corner. And AI introduces inductive unknowns. Getting comfortable there is generally pretty hard for engineers, but that's why we go an interdisciplinary effort. We've had this framework that we've spoken to across Department of Defense, across many civilian agencies, literally the Home Office of the UK, which is their sort of OMB, if you will, for the UK, adopted this framework in looking at ethics and how to, if you will, deploy AI in an ethical framework. So we're excited about the work at Energy, but we feel like there's no way to talk about AI without a coupling of a systematic ethical framework and decision-making process that has to be in place.
And Cheryl, tell us about what Energy is doing.
Yes, so interesting what Toni was just explaining. So we're at the start the beginning of that journey of identifying ethical principles. We're looking at, of course, the DoD and the intelligence community has put out very impressive work there. We are connecting in with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center at DoD and learning from their journey on ethical principles and how they're executing on them, because it's really a great thing to produce those principles and publicize them and really do all of the public relations work to get it out and the awareness in the organization. But then it's the next level that really matters, which is, well, how do you turn that into policies that people can really follow, like a prescription to follow, if you will. So we're looking at it from that perspective, but just starting on that journey.
That's great. And we have a minute or two left. So I want to close out. I know that both the Department of Energy and Microsoft are part of something that's called the First Five Consortium. So I'd love to hear about that, what that is, and sort of what it's achieving so far. I know it's relatively new, but I'd love to get an update on how that's going. Cheryl and then Toni to wrap us up.
Well, super. This is just a really exciting project, and it's one of the two that we've launched with our new office since arrival in February. We had launched the COVID Insights that I mentioned, and then the First Five. And the First Five is a consortium, and we co-chair it with Microsoft. So really happy to say that. We have about 14 members right now, and it's all about getting AI tools into the hands of first responders. And considering the problems that we're having with the fires and the floods right now, CAL FIRE is one of the members of the consortium, and we're creating those tools right now to turn video feed as quickly as possible into a map of the fire line. So really going well. I just had a briefing today, and then I also maintain a close relationship with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center at DoD on this, and also with our co-chairs in Microsoft.
Great. And Toni, wrap us up.
We could go all day on this one. We're so proud of being part of this in coordination with Cheryl's organization. But the name First Five is a little bit intriguing to people. So let's just talk. The first 5 minutes of any disaster we found to be so critical in the diagnostics of getting to root cause and understanding the directions and how to actually intervene. And so we're using the AI as a way of, if you will, putting that first line of defense in place. And that is really what is driving this sort of First Five capability. So it really has organizations like Microsoft within my team, particularly charged on the precision data analytics that can be so critical in the early part of a crisis. And so we're thrilled to be part of the partnership. And I think there's a lot more to come about what we learn and how we are able to intervene across various situations across this country.
That's great, and it's a great story and a great application of how important AI can be in our nation. So that's it. That's all we have time for. I think we even went a little extra, but I think we could talk about this all day, but that's fine. But once again, Cheryl Ingstad, Toni Townes-Whitley, thank you both so much. This has been a tremendous conversation, and it really opened some eyes into what both of you are doing. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Billy. Good to see you, Cheryl.
Nice to see you, Toni. Bye-bye.